courtroom was dead silent, the air thick enough to choke on. Detective Clint Harland sat in the witness stand, a smug grin plastered across his face. He looked directly at the defendant, a man he'd beaten, handcuffed, and framed, and mouthed the word, "Nobody." He thought he had won. He thought the black man in the orange jumpsuit was just another statistic he could bury under a pile of falsified evidence. But he didn't know who sat in that chair. He didn't know that the nobody he arrested was actually Special Agent Darius Webb, the head of the FBI's Internal Corruption Unit. And in exactly 30 seconds, Harland's career, his pension, and his freedom were about to be incinerated. Stay tuned. You need to see this. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. It was 11:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of night where the streetlights reflected off the wet asphalt like spilled oil. Darius Webb adjusted his grip on the leather steering wheel of his charcoal grey sedan. It wasn't a flashy car, a mid-range model, reliable, unassuming. Exactly the kind of car the Bureau issued when they didn't want you to stand out, but didn't want you breaking down in the middle of a sting operation. Darius was tired. He had just spent 6 months embedded in a money-laundering ring in Chicago, and this transfer to Washington was supposed to be his cool-down period. He was technically on leave. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was dressed in a dark hoodie, comfortable joggers, and a pair of worn sneakers. To the untrained eye, he looked like any other guy heading home from a late shift at a warehouse or a gym. To Detective Clint Harland, he looked like a target. Darius saw the red and blue lights flash in his rearview mirror before he heard the siren. He glanced at his speedometer. He was doing 35 in a 40 zone. He checked his mirrors. His tags were current. He signaled, pulled over slowly to the curb, and killed the engine. He knew the drill. He'd been a federal agent for 12 years, but before that, he'd just been a black man in America. He knew that the badge in his glove compartment could end this, but his training kicked in. Assess the threat, observe, gather intel. He rolled the window down as the heavy boots crunched against the gravel. A flashlight beam cut through the dark interior of the car, blinding him momentarily. "License and registration!" a voice barked. It was rough, impatient. Darius kept his hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" "I said license and registration. Do not make me ask you again." Darius moved his right hand slowly. "It's in the glove box. I'm reaching for it now." "Watch it," the officer snapped, his hand dropping to rest on the holstered weapon at his hip. The officer leaned in. The nameplate on his chest read, Harland. He was a big man, heavy-set with a buzz cut that did nothing to hide the redness of his neck. His eyes were watery and hard, scanning the interior of the car not for safety, but for an excuse. Darius handed over his civilian driver's license. Harland snatched it, shining his flashlight on the card and then back at Darius's face. "Darius Webb," Harland read the name like it was an insult. "You from around here, Webb?" "Just moved here," Darius said calmly. His voice was steady, a deep baritone that usually commanded respect. Tonight it seemed to irritate the detective. "Nice car for a guy in a hoodie," Harland muttered. "What do you do for work?" Darius paused. He wasn't technically allowed to blow his cover for a traffic stop unless his life was in imminent danger. "I work in security." Harland let out a short, dry laugh. "Security. Right. Step out of the car." "Am I under arrest, detective?" "I smell marijuana," Harland lied. He said it with such casual ease that Darius knew he had said it 1,000 times before. "I don't smoke, and there is no marijuana in this car," Darius said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I didn't ask for your opinion. I gave you a lawful order. Step out of the vehicle or I will drag you out. Darius calculated the odds. If he resisted, Harland would escalate. If he revealed his badge now, Harland might back off. But he would also know he had almost harassed a Fed. Harland was a detective, not a patrol officer. Detectives didn't usually do traffic stops unless they were looking for something specific, or unless they were looking for trouble. Darius unbuckled his seatbelt and opened the door. As he stepped out into the cold drizzle, Harland spun him around, slamming him against the side of the sedan. The impact rattled Darius's teeth, but he didn't flinch. "Spread 'em," Harland hissed. Darius complied. He felt Harland's rough hands patting him down, digging into his pockets aggressively. Harland pulled out Darius's wallet, his keys, and a pack of gum. He tossed them onto the wet hood of the car. "Where's the stash, Webb?" "There is no stash," Darius repeated. Harland leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and peppermint. "You listen to me. I run this district. I know a dealer when I see one. You're going to tell me where the drugs are, or we're going to have a very bad night." "You're making a mistake," Darius said quietly. Harland scoffed. He turned back to his patrol car, where a younger, nervous-looking officer was standing by the door. "Officer Ridley, search the vehicle." Ridley, a rookie who looked like he was barely out of the academy, hesitated. Detective Harland? Did we get probable cause?" "I said I smelled weed, Ridley. Tear it apart." Darius watched as the rookie rummaged through his car. He watched as Ridley opened the center console, checked under the seats, and finally popped the glove compartment. That was where the badge was. Darius tensed. If Ridley saw the badge, the gold shield of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, this would be over. But it would also ruin the operation he was here to set up. He was supposed to be low profile. Ridley pulled out a stack of papers. He moved a black leather wallet, the credential case. He paused. "Ridley," Harland shouted. "Anything?" Ridley looked at the black leather case. He didn't open it. He just shoved it back under a pile of napkins. "Nothing, detective. Clean." Harland's face turned a shade of purple. He marched over to the car, shoving Ridley aside. "Useless," he muttered. He dove into the car himself. Darius stood in the rain, water dripping off his nose. He watched Harland tear the upholstery. He watched him rip the lining of the trunk. Harland came up with nothing. Frustrated and embarrassed in front of his junior officer, Harland walked back to Darius. He couldn't let him go. His ego wouldn't allow it. He reached into his own pocket. Darius saw the motion, the subtle slide of a hand into a jacket pocket, and the clenched fist that came out. Harland grabbed Darius by the collar and shoved him. "Resisting arrest!" "I haven't moved," Darius said, his voice dropping an octave. "Check your body cam." "It's malfunctioning," Harland smirked. He swept Darius's legs, slamming him face first onto the wet pavement. Darius groaned as his cheek scraped the asphalt. He felt a knee dig into his spine. "Stop fighting," Harland screamed for the benefit of the dashcam in the patrol car. "Stop reaching for my weapon." "I am not resisting," Darius said clearly, engaging his core to protect his ribs. Harland cuffed him, the metal ratcheting tight enough to cut off circulation. Then he leaned down, whispering into Darius's ear. "I'm going to ruin you, boy. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you never drove through my town." Harland stood up, dusting off his knees. He looked down at Darius, who was lying in a puddle, staring up with eyes that burned with a cold, terrifying intelligence. "Get him in the back," Harland ordered Ridley. "Charge him with assault on an officer, resisting arrest, and, let's say, possession with intent." "Possession?" Ridley squeaked. "But we didn't find—" Harland opened his hand. A small, clear baggie of white powder sat in his palm. "Found this in his pocket. Must have missed it the first time." Darius watched the baggie. He memorized the size, the way it was tied. He memorized the look on Ridley's face, fear and complicity. As they dragged him toward the patrol car, Darius didn't struggle. He didn't scream. He simply looked at Harland and spoke for the last time that night. "Make sure you spell my name right on the report, Detective." Harland laughed. "Don't worry. Nobody's going to read it anyway." The holding cell at the 4th Precinct smelled of urine, bleach, and despair. It was a concrete box painted a peeling shade of industrial grey. A metal bench ran along one wall, bolted to the floor. Darius sat on the bench, his back straight. Most men in his position would be pacing, screaming for a lawyer, or crying. Darius was meditating. He was compartmentalizing the rage, storing it away for fuel. He needed a clear head. He had been processed like a common criminal, fingerprinted, mug-shot, strip-searched. The humiliation was designed to break people, to make them feel small and powerless. But Darius knew who he was. He had invoked his right to remain silent immediately. He hadn't asked for a public defender yet. He was waiting. Around 3 a.m., the heavy steel door buzzed and swung open. Detective Harland walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He didn't offer one to Darius. He pulled a metal chair from the table in the center of the room, turned it around, and straddled it, taking a long sip of the steaming liquid. "Comfortable?" Harland asked. Darius stared at the wall behind Harland's head. "You know, I looked you up," Harland continued, his voice echoing in the small room. "Darius Webb. No priors. Clean record. Worked for a private security firm in Chicago for a few years, then moved here. Kinda boring, honestly." Harland leaned forward. "See, that's what I don't get. A guy with a clean record, driving a nice car, suddenly decides to carry an ounce of cocaine in his pocket and swing at a cop? Doesn't add up." Darius remained silent. "Unless—" Harland smiled, showing yellowed teeth. "Unless you think you're smarter than us. You think because you wear a hoodie and drive a sedan, we won't notice you moving product through my district." "I want my phone call," Darius said. Harland chuckled. "System's down. Phones are out. Terrible timing, really." It was a lie. Darius knew it. It was a classic isolation tactic. "Here's the deal, Webb," Harland said, his tone shifting to mock sympathy. "You're looking at 10 to 15. Assault on a police officer is a felony. The drugs? That's trafficking weight. You're going to prison. You're going to lose that car, your job, your apartment. Your life is over." Harland took another sip of coffee. "But I'm a reasonable man. You have no priors. Maybe you were just holding for someone. Maybe you got scared. You give me a name, a real dealer, someone big, and maybe that baggie I found. Maybe it gets lost in the evidence locker. Maybe the assault charge gets dropped to disorderly conduct." This was the shakedown. Harland wasn't just a racist cop, he was a corrupt one. He was using Darius to pad his arrest stats, or more likely, to eliminate competition for whatever dealers Harland was actually protecting. Darius turned his head slowly, locking eyes with Harland. The intensity of his gaze made the detective flinch, just for a fraction of a second. "I don't know any dealers," Darius said, "and I didn't assault you." Harland stood up, kicking the chair back. The metal screeched against the concrete. "Have it your way. You want to play the tough guy? Fine. You can rot in here until your arraignment on Monday. That's 4 days, Webb. 4 days in the cage with the drunks and the brawlers." Harland walked to the door and banged on it to be let out. Before he left, he looked back. "You're a nobody, Webb. Just another thug who thought he could pass for a citizen. I'm going to make an example out of you." The door slammed shut. The lock engaged with a heavy thud. Darius waited 10 seconds. Then he stood up, and walked to the bars of the cell. He looked at the camera mounted in the hallway corner. He knew it was recording. He held up his hand, fingers spread. Then he tapped his wrist 3 times. He made a fist. He touched his left shoulder. It looked like nervous fidgeting. But to anyone trained in the Bureau's emergency distress signals, it meant agent compromised, wrongful detainment, corrupt local LEO, maintain cover. He didn't know if anyone was watching the feed who would understand, but he had to try. The weekend passed in a blur of misery. The cell filled up on Friday night. A drunk driver vomited in the corner. A kid who looked no older than 18 cried for his mother. Darius stayed on his section of the bench, protecting his space with a quiet menace that kept the others away. On Monday morning, he was chained to 3 other men and loaded onto a bus headed for the courthouse. The courtroom was a hive of activity. Public defenders were running around with stacks of files, trying to learn their clients' names 5 minutes before seeing the judge. The air smelled of sweat and old paper. Darius was led to a table where a woman was frantically flipping through a file. She looked exhausted. Her name tag read, Fiona Gills. "Mr. Webb?" she asked, not looking up. "I'm Fiona Gills, public defender. I just got your file. It looks bad." "I didn't do it," Darius said. "Everyone says that," she sighed, finally looking at him. She paused. There was something about him, his posture, his calmness, that didn't fit the usual profile of her Monday morning clients. "Look, the police report is detailed. Detective Harland says you attacked him. He found cocaine. The prosecutor is asking for $100,000 bail." "I want a trial," Darius said. "Whoa, slow down," Fiona said. "We haven't even arraigned yet. They're going to offer a plea, probably 2 years probation if you plead to the possession. The assault charge goes away." "No deals," Darius said firmly. "I want a trial, and I want the body cam footage." Fiona rubbed her temples. "Harland's report says the camera malfunctioned." "How convenient," Darius said dryly. "What about the dashcam?" "Corruption of data file. Technical error." "And the rookie, Officer Ridley?" "He corroborated Harland's statement." Darius nodded. It was a tight frame. They had closed all the loops. "Enter a plea of not guilty. Demand a jury trial." Fiona looked at him with a mix of pity and frustration. "Mr. Webb, if you go to trial against a decorated detective like Clint Harland with 0 evidence on your side, you will lose. And the judge? Judge Stein. He loves the police. He'll give you the max." "Not guilty," Darius repeated. The bailiff called out, "All rise." Judge Harold Stein walked in, his black robes billowing. He was an older man, with a face like a dried apple, and eyes that had seen too many lies. He sat down and looked over his glasses at the docket. Case number 49201, the State versus Darius Webb. Fiona stood up. "Good morning, Your Honor. Fiona Gills for the defense." A sleek, sharp-suited man stood up on the other side. This was the prosecutor, Thomas Reed. He looked like a shark that had just smelled blood. "Thomas Reed for the state, Your Honor. Charges are assault on a police officer, resisting arrest, and possession of a controlled substance," Judge Stein read. "How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Fiona said. "State on bail?" Stein asked. "Your Honor," Reed began, his voice smooth. "The defendant attacked a decorated officer during a routine traffic stop. He was found with a significant amount of cocaine. He has no ties to the community, having only recently moved here. He is a flight risk and a danger to the public. The state requests bail be set at $150,000. Fiona jumped in. "Your Honor, that is excessive. Mr. Webb has no criminal record. He is gainfully employed in the security sector. He—" Judge Stein cut her off with a wave of his hand. Assaulting an officer is a serious matter, Ms. Gills. I'm setting bail at $100,000 cash or bond." Fiona slumped. That was it. Darius would be stuck in jail until the trial. Darius stood there, stone-faced. He looked toward the back of the courtroom. Detective Harland was leaning against the back wall, arms crossed, smiling. He gave Darius a little salute. Darius looked back at the judge. "I can post it." The courtroom went quiet. Fiona looked at him, stunned. "What?" "I can post the bail," Darius said. "I have the savings." It was a lie, partially. He didn't have the savings from a security guard job. He had access to a covert operational fund. He had memorized the account number. He would have to burn a massive amount of bureau capital to do this, and he'd have to explain it to his superiors later. But he was not going to sit in a cell while Harland roamed free. He needed to be out to build his trap. Judge Stein raised an eyebrow. "Very well. If you can post it, you're free until trial. Clark, set the date. 6 weeks from now." Darius was processed out 4 hours later. As he walked out of the courthouse into the blinding afternoon sun, he felt the vibration of a phone he had retrieved from his personal effects. He turned it on. Dozens of missed messages. He dialed a number that wasn't saved in his contacts. It rang once. "Director," Darius said. "Agent Webb," a female voice answered sharply. "We received your distress signal. We were about to send a tactical team to extract you. What is going on?" "I was burned by a local LEO," Darius said, walking down the courthouse steps, his eyes scanning the street. "Corrupt detective, planted drugs, false charges." "We'll have the charges quashed immediately," the director said. "I'll call the district attorney." "No," Darius said. There was a silence on the line. "Excuse me. If you pull me out now, Harland walks. He's done this before. I saw the way his partner looked. This is a pattern. If I flash the badge now, he gets fired, maybe. Then he goes and works security somewhere, or moves to another precinct. I want him in prison." "Darius, you are asking to go through a criminal trial. It's risky. If the jury convicts you, they won't," Darius said. "I need resources. I need a forensic audio team. I need a background dive on Harland and Judge Stein. And I need you to authorize my appearance in court as a civilian until the very last second." "You want to ambush him," the director realized. "I want to destroy him," Darius corrected. "He called me a nobody. I want to show him exactly who I am." "Permission granted," the director said after a long pause. "But Darius, don't miss." "I never do." Darius hung up. He hailed a cab. The game was on. The next 4 weeks were a masterclass in covert operations. Darius couldn't go back to his apartment. Harland would be watching. He checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, under the name Marcus Cole. Wait, no, Cole is a forbidden name. He checked in under the name David Ross. He turned the motel room into a command center. The bureau sent him a laptop with military-grade encryption. Darius spent his days digging into Clint Harland's life. What he found was a sewage system of corruption. Harland wasn't just planting drugs, he was stealing them. He was shaking down local businesses for protection money. He had 3 excessive force complaints in the last year alone, all dismissed by internal affairs. And the common thread? Judge Harold Stein had signed off on every single warrant Harland had requested. They were working together. Darius needed proof. The word of a black defendant against a white detective wouldn't be enough, even with the FBI behind him. He needed Harland to hang himself. He started tailing Harland. He used a rental car, changing vehicles every 2 days. He watched Harland meet with known drug dealers in alleyways behind bars. He used a parabolic microphone to record conversations from across the street. "I don't care if you're short," Harland's voice crackled through the headphones one rainy Tuesday. You pay me or you go away. Just like that Webb guy. You think he's enjoying his freedom? I own this town." Darius smiled. "Got you." But he needed more. He needed the dashcam footage from the night of his arrest. The police said it was corrupted. Darius knew that corrupted usually meant deleted, but still on the hard drive. He needed someone inside the station. He thought of Officer Ridley, the rookie. The kid had looked terrified. He wasn't a bad cop yet. He was just a coward. Darius found Ridley's home address. He waited until Ridley got off shift at 2:10 a.m. Ridley lived in a small apartment complex. Darius waited in the shadows of the stairwell. When Ridley came up the stairs, keys in hand, Darius stepped out. Ridley jumped, reaching for his gun. "Don't," Darius said. He held his hands up, palms open. "I'm not here to fight." "Webb?" Ridley's eyes went wide. "What? What are you doing here? If Harland finds out—" "Harland isn't going to find out," Darius said, "unless you tell him. You need to leave. I can't talk to you." "You know he planted those drugs, Ridley." Ridley looked down at his shoes. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do. I saw your face. You're young. You joined the force to help people, right? To be a hero." Ridley didn't answer. "Harland is a cancer," Darius said, stepping closer. "He's going to drag you down with him. When this blows up, and it will blow up, you're going to be an accessory to a felony. Kidnapping, evidence tampering, perjury. That's 20 years, Ridley. You'll be an old man when you get out." Ridley was shaking. "I can't. He knows people. He'll kill my career." Darius reached into his pocket. Ridley flinched. Darius pulled out a plain manila envelope. "This isn't a threat," Darius said. "It's a life raft." He handed the envelope to Ridley. "Inside is a number. If you decide you want to be a cop instead of a criminal, you call it. You tell them where the backup server for the dashcam footage is. Every precinct has one." Ridley took the envelope. Who are you?" Darius just looked at him. "You'll find out in court." Darius turned and walked away into the night. He had planted the seed. Now he had to wait for it to grow. 2 days before the trial, Darius met with his public defender, Fiona Gills. "We have to take the plea," Fiona said, pacing her small office. "The prosecutor isn't budging. They have the drugs, the officer's testimony. Darius, please. I can get you 2 years probation. If we go to trial on Monday, you're going away for 10 years. Darius sat calmly in the chair. "No plea." "Why are you doing this?" Fiona exploded. "You are committing suicide. I have nothing to work with. No witnesses, no footage, nothing." "You have me," Darius said. "That's not enough." "Fiona," Darius said, using her first name for the first time. His voice was gentle, but commanded absolute attention. "Trust me. When we go into that courtroom, do exactly what I say. Let Harland testify. Let him lie. Let him tell the jury what a menace I am. Don't object. Just let him talk." "And then?" "And then," Darius said, "you put me on the stand. That's legal suicide. The prosecutor will tear you apart. Let him try." Fiona stared at him. She had been a public defender for 10 years. She had seen crazy clients, desperate clients, and lying clients. She had never seen anyone this calm in the face of destruction. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we do it your way. But if this goes south, don't say I didn't warn you. It won't go south," Darius said, standing up. "It's going to go exactly where I want it to." The courtroom on Monday morning was a stage set for a tragedy. The air conditioner hummed with a low, rattling drone that did nothing to cool the stifling tension in the room. Judge Harold Stein sat high on his bench, looking bored, flipping through documents, as if the fate of the man before him was nothing more than a clerical errand. Darius sat at the defense table. He wore a suit today, charcoal grey, crisp, tailored. It was a stark contrast to the hoodie he'd been arrested in. Beside him, Fiona Gills was vibrating with anxiety. Her leg bounced under the table, shaking the water pitcher. "State, call your first witness," Judge Stein droned. Prosecutor Thomas Reed stood up, buttoning his jacket. "The state calls Detective Clint Harland." The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Harland walked in. He was in his dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest. He looked like the picture of law and order. He walked to the stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. The lie began the moment he opened his mouth. "Detective," Reed began, pacing in front of the jury box. "Walk us through the night of November 14th. Harland shifted in his seat, looking earnestly at the jury. "I was on patrol in District 4. It's a high-crime area. We've had a lot of issues with trafficking recently. I observed the defendant's vehicle swerving. He crossed the center line twice. I initiated a traffic stop for safety." Darius wrote something on his notepad. Lie number 1. "I was driving perfectly straight." "And what happened when you approached the vehicle?" "The driver, Mr. Webb, was belligerent immediately," Harland said, his voice dropping to a somber tone. "He refused to show identification. He was shouting profanities. I smelled a strong odor of narcotics coming from the window." "Did you fear for your safety?" "I did," Harland nodded gravely. He made a sudden movement toward the glove box. "In my experience, that's where people keep weapons. I asked him to step out. He refused. I had to forcibly remove him. That's when he attacked me." "Attacked you?" Reed feigned shock. "Yes, sir. He swung at me, struck me in the shoulder. I had to subdue him. During the search, I found a bag of cocaine in his jacket pocket." Reed walked to the evidence table and picked up an evidence bag containing white powder. "Is this the cocaine?" "It is." Reed turned to the jury. "A violent man, drugs, an attack on a decorated officer. The state rests its questioning." It was Fiona's turn to cross-examine. She stood up, her papers trembling in her hands. She looked at Darius. He gave her a subtle nod. "Stick to the script." "Detective Harland," Fiona said, her voice thin. "You said my client swerved, but the dash cam footage was corrupted. Is that correct?" Harland smiled, a condescending tilt of his head. "Technology isn't perfect, Mum. Systems fail. It's unfortunate, but my testimony stands. And the body cam? Battery failure, long shift." "So," Fiona said, gaining a little more confidence, "we have only your word that he swerved, only your word that he attacked you, and only your word that you found the drugs in his pocket, not somewhere else." "Objection!" Reed shouted, "implying fabrication of evidence." "Sustained," Judge Stein snapped. "Watch yourself, Miss Gills." Fiona sat down, defeated. Next came Officer Ridley. The young rookie looked pale. He walked to the stand like he was walking to the gallows. He avoided looking at Darius. He avoided looking at Harland. "Officer Ridley," Reed asked, "did you see the defendant strike Detective Harland?" Ridley hesitated. The silence stretched for 5 seconds. 10. Harland cleared his throat loudly from the gallery. Ridley jumped. I saw a struggle. It was dark. It was raining, but yes, I saw Mr. Webb resist." "And the drugs?" "Detective Harland showed them to me. He said he found them on the suspect." "Thank you," Reed said. Darius watched Ridley. He saw the sweat on the kid's upper lip. Ridley was crumbling. He had lied, but he had left a door open. He said he found them. Not I saw him find them. The prosecution rested. The jury looked at Darius with cold eyes. To them, he was just another criminal who had gotten caught and was wasting their time. Judge Stein looked at the clock. "Defense, call your witness." Fiona stood up. She took a deep breath. The entire courtroom expected her to plead for mercy or call a character witness. The defense calls Darius Webb. A ripple of surprise went through the room. Defendants rarely took the stand. It was too risky. Prosecutor Reed smiled. He was going to enjoy this. Darius stood up. He buttoned his suit jacket. He walked to the stand with a fluid, predatory grace. He didn't look like a nervous defendant. He looked like a man walking into his own office. He took the oath. He sat down. "Mr. Webb?" Fiona asked. "Did you attack Detective Harland?" "No." "Did you have drugs?" "No." "Then why are we here?" Darius looked directly at the jury. "Because Detective Harland made a mistake. He judged a book by its cover, and he didn't bother to read the pages." "No further questions," Fiona said. It was the shortest direct examination in the court's history. She sat down. Prosecutor Reed stood up. He cracked his knuckles. He walked toward Darius like a wolf circling a wounded deer. "Mr. Webb," Reed began, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You say you're innocent, yet a decorated detective says you're guilty. Who should the jury believe? The man with the badge, or the unemployed security guard?" Darius leaned forward toward the microphone. "I am not unemployed, Mr. Reed. Oh, excuse me. The freelance security guard. Tell me, Darius, do you have a problem with authority?" "I have a problem with corruption," Darius said calmly. "Is that right?" Reed laughed. "So this is a conspiracy? Detective Harland, Officer Ridley, the entire police department. They all just decided to pick on you? Why? What makes you so special?" "I'm not special," Darius said. "I'm just the one who caught him." "Caught him?" Reed scoffed. "You're the one in handcuffs, Mr. Webb. You're the one facing 10 years. Reed leaned in close, invading Darius's personal space. "Admit it. You got caught riding dirty. You got scared. You took a swing at a cop. And now you're trying to spin a fairy tale to save your skin." Darius remained perfectly still. "Are you finished, Mr. Reed?" "I'm finished when I say I'm finished. Answer the question." "You didn't ask a question," Darius said. "You made a statement, and it was incorrect." Reed turned red. "You think you're smart? You think you can out-talk me?" "I don't think," Darius said. "I know. Your Honor," Reed shouted. "The witness is being hostile." "Answer the questions, Mr. Webb," Judge Stein warned. "I'm trying to, Your Honor," Darius said. "But the prosecutor seems to be unaware of the facts." "What facts?" Reed yelled. "The fact that you're a drug dealer?" "The fact," Darius said, his voice rising just enough to cut through the noise, "that Detective Harland has deposited $40,000 in cash into a secret account in the Cayman Islands in the last 6 months, the fact that he has falsified 19 arrest reports this year, and the fact that the dashcam footage isn't corrupted." The courtroom went silent. Reed froze. "What?" Darius looked past Reed, straight at Harland in the back of the room. Harland was standing up now, his face pale. "I said," Darius enunciated clearly, "the footage isn't corrupted. It was deleted, but deleted files can be recovered, if you have the right friends." "Objection!" Reed screamed. "This is hearsay. There is no evidence of any of this." "Actually," Darius said, reaching into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. The bailiff flinched, hand going to his gun. "I have the evidence right here." Darius pulled out a small, silver flash drive. "Mr. Webb!" Judge Stein banged his gavel. "You cannot introduce evidence that hasn't been submitted to the court. This is a procedural violation." "It's not defense evidence, Your Honor," Darius said coolly. "It's federal evidence." "Federal?" Judge Stein paused. "What are you talking about?" Darius looked at Fiona. "Now." Fiona stood up. She looked terrified, but she pressed the button on the laptop, connected to the court's projector system. She had plugged the drive in before Darius took the stand. "Stop this!" Reed shouted. "Bailiff, seize that laptop!" "If you touch that computer," a voice boomed from the back of the room, "you will be charged with obstruction of justice." Every head turned. The doors at the back of the courtroom burst open. But it wasn't the police. 6 men and women in dark suits strode in. They moved with a synchronized, lethal precision. They wore blue windbreakers with yellow lettering on the back, FBI. Leading them was a stern woman with grey hair, Director Miller. "What is the meaning of this?" Judge Stein demanded, standing up. "This is my courtroom." "Not anymore, Harold," Director Miller said. She walked through the gate, ignoring the bailiff. She walked right up to the prosecution table. On the witness stand, Darius Webb stood up. He didn't look like a defendant anymore. He looked like a titan. "Your Honor," Darius said, "I am submitting into evidence Exhibit A, the recovered dashcam footage from Patrol Unit 4 Alpha." Before the judge could protest, the large screen above the jury box flickered to life. The video played. It was dark and rainy, but the audio was crystal clear. "Where's the stash, Webb?" Harlan's voice rang out through the courtroom speakers. "There is no stash. I'm going to ruin you, boy. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you never drove through my town." The jury gasped. Then, the video showed Harlan reaching into his own pocket. It showed the baggie. It showed him planting it on Darius. "Make sure you spell my name right on the report, Detective. Don't worry, nobody's going to read it anyway." The video froze on Harlan's sneering face. In the courtroom, the real Harlan was backing toward the door. "Hold it right there," Darius said. He didn't shout, but his voice carried the weight of a hammer drop. Darius reached into his pocket again. This time, he didn't pull out a flash drive. He pulled out a leather case. He flipped it open. The gold shield caught the courtroom lights. "Special Agent Darius Webb, FBI Internal Corruption Unit." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. Prosecutor Reed dropped his pen. It clattered loudly on the floor. Judge Stein sat back in his chair, his face draining of blood until he looked like a wax statue. Darius stepped down from the witness stand. He walked over to the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen," Darius said, "I apologize for the deception, but it was the only way to show you the truth. The man sitting in the back, Detective Clint Harlan, is not a protector of the peace. He is a criminal hiding behind a badge, and he is not alone." Darius turned slowly to face the bench. "Judge Stein, you signed the warrant for the raid on the Ecstatic Drug House on 5th Street last May. The money seized in that raid was never logged into evidence. It went into a shell company called Stein Realty Holdings." That is preposterous," Stein stammered. "We have the bank records, Harold," Director Miller said from the floor. "We have the wire transfers. We have the emails between you and Harlan discussing the split." Darius turned to Harlan. The detective was pressed against the back doors, but 2 FBI agents were already there, blocking his exit. "You called me a nobody," Darius said, walking down the center aisle toward Harlan. The gallery parted for him like the Red Sea. I didn't know," Harlan whispered. His arrogance was gone. He looked small. "That's the point," Darius said, stopping 2 feet from him. "You didn't know. You thought you could crush a citizen because he was black, because he was alone, because you had the power. You forgot who gave you that power. You forgot that you serve the people." Darius pulled a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Turn around, Clint." "You can't do this," Harlan cried, looking at the judge, looking at the prosecutor. "Reed, do something." Reed was busy shoving papers into his briefcase, trying to look invisible. "Turn around," Darius repeated. Harland slowly turned. Darius slapped the cuffs on him. He tightened them, just tight enough to be uncomfortable, a poetic mirror of that rainy Tuesday night. "Clint Harland," Darius said, his voice echoing. "You are under arrest for racketeering, perjury, evidence tampering, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and distribution of narcotics." Harland slumped. "And," Darius added, leaning close to his ear, "assault on a federal officer." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters who had been dozing in the back were now shouting into their phones. The jury was whispering furiously. "We're not done," Darius announced. He pointed to the bench. "Judge Harold Stein, please step down." "You have no jurisdiction here," Stein roared, trying to muster his last shred of authority. "Federal crimes, Your Honor," Director Miller said. "Wire fraud, money laundering. We have a warrant signed by a federal magistrate this morning." Two agents walked up to the bench. They didn't treat Stein with the reverence he was used to. They pulled him out of his high chair. They cuffed his hands behind his back, over his black robes. The visual was striking, the symbol of justice being shackled for corruption. Darius looked at Officer Ridley. The rookie was sitting in the front row, his head in his hands. Darius walked over to him. Ridley looked up, tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry," Ridley whispered. "I was scared." "I know," Darius said softly. "But you did the right thing in the end." It was Ridley who had unlocked the server room for Darius's tech team remotely. It was Ridley who had testified hesitantly, leaving the cracks in the story. "You're suspended pending investigation," Darius said. "But you're not going to prison, Ridley. You're going to be a witness." Ridley nodded, sobbing with relief. Darius turned to his public defender, Fiona. She was still standing at her table, stunned. "You're a good lawyer, Fiona," Darius said. "You listened to your client. You held the line." I didn't do anything," she stammered. "You gave me the floor," Darius said. "That's all I needed." As Harland was dragged out of the courtroom, he locked eyes with Darius one last time. "Who are you?" Harland spat. Darius adjusted his cuffs. "I'm the nobody you shouldn't have messed with." The cleanup took weeks. The Harland scandal dominated the news cycle. It wasn't just Harland and Stein. The investigation revealed a network involving 2 other detectives and a clerk in the evidence locker. It was a rot that went deep, and Darius had just poured bleach on it. Darius returned to the bureau office in downtown Seattle. He was back in his standard attire, tactical pants, polo shirt, gun on his hip. He walked into the briefing room where his team was waiting. They gave him a standing ovation. All right, Darius said, waving them down. "Job's not done. We have to build the case for the trial. Harland is going to fight this." "He can try," Director Miller said, tossing a file on the table. "But we found his little black book. Names, dates, amounts. He kept receipts on everyone." Darius picked up the file. Of course he did. Crooks never trust each other. Later that evening, Darius drove back to the spot where he had been arrested. It was raining again. He parked his car, the same charcoal sedan, and got out. He stood on the wet pavement. He looked at the spot where his face had been pressed into the asphalt. He felt a weight lift off his chest. He hadn't just won a case. He had sent a message. There were still bad cops out there. There was still injustice. But tonight, the good guys had won. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Fiona Gills. "The DA is reviewing all of Harland's past convictions. They're overturning 15 cases so far. Innocent men are going home because of you." Darius smiled. That was the real victory. 6 months later, Darius stood behind the one-way glass of the interrogation room. Inside, Clint Harland sat at a metal table. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His hair was patchy. The swagger was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who knew he was cornered. He had pleaded guilty. There was no way out. The evidence was overwhelming. Today was sentencing. Darius didn't have to be there, but he wanted to see it through. They moved to the federal courthouse. It was a different vibe from the county court. Cleaner, sharper. Harland stood before a federal judge. "Clint Harland," the judge read, "you have disgraced your badge. You have betrayed the public trust. For the crimes of racketeering, distribution, and civil rights violations, I sentence you to 25 years in a federal penitentiary. No possibility of parole." 25 years. Harland would be an old man when he got out. If he survived. Ex-cops didn't do well in prison, especially corrupt ones who had put half the inmates there. Harland was led away in shackles. As he passed the aisle where Darius was sitting, he stopped. He didn't say anything. There were no words left. He just looked at the floor and kept walking. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining, a rarity for Seattle. Fiona was waiting for him. "Buy you a coffee, Special Agent?" she asked. "Call me Darius," he said, shaking her hand. "And sure, but I'm buying. I think I can afford it now that I have access to my accounts again." They walked down the steps. "You know," Fiona said, "you could have just flashed the badge that first night. You could have avoided the jail time, the risk." "I could have," Darius admitted. "But if I had, Harland would have just been reprimanded. He would have stayed on the streets. He would have found another victim. Someone who didn't have a badge. Someone who couldn't fight back. I had to let him think he was winning, so I could take everything from him." "Instant karma," Fiona smiled. "No," Darius corrected her. "Karma is accidental. This was justice, and justice takes work." Darius looked out at the city skyline. He knew there were other Harlands out there. He knew the fight wasn't over. But for today, the badge meant something again. He walked toward his car, ready for the next case. Because there was always another case. And somewhere, someone else was thinking they could get away with hurting a nobody. They were about to be very, very wrong. This story reminds us that power doesn't make you righteous, and a badge doesn't make you above the law. Clint Harland thought he could crush Darius Webb because he saw him as powerless. He learned the hard way that you never judge a book by its cover, and you certainly don't assume that the quiet man in the hoodie won't dismantle your entire life. Justice was served, not just for Darius, but for every victim Harland had silenced. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes revenge and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with a friend who loves a good drama. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Let me know in the comments. Do you think Harland got what he deserved, or was 25 years too light? Thanks for watching.